Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sheriff Adan Mendoza, Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. With me today is Dr. Heather Jarrell, Chief Medical Investigator for the New Mexico Office of the Medical Investigator, Dr. Aaron Phipps, New Mexico State Public Health Veterinarian, New Mexico Department of Health, and also Chief Brian Moya, Santa Fe City Fire Department. This investigation started on February 26th with the discovery of Mr. Hackman and Miss Arakawa and their dog at their residence. I just want to do a short recap and then touch on some new information. As we know, both individuals tested negative for carbon monoxide. City Fire conducted tests and deemed scene safe for deputies to conduct their investigation. The preliminary pacemaker interrogation results were released last week, and I'll let Dr. Jarrell touch more specifically on those results. The gas company New Mexico, they also did an analysis of the residence, and they found one minor leak in a single burner on the kitchen stove, which was 0.33% of room air, which was pretty minute and insignificant. Since that time, Xena, the deceased dog, has been taken for necropsy at the Veterinary Diagnostic Services, and we'll be awaiting those results. Let's speak a little bit in reference to the timeline for Betsy Arakawa. We know from our investigation that on February 9th, 2025, she picked up Xena from Gruta Veterinary Hospital. There was a procedure that was done with the dog, which may explain why the dog was in a crate at the residence. Let's move on to February 11th, 2025. Mrs. Arakawa had an email conversation with her massage therapist at about 11:21 a.m. Moving on into the afternoon, Ms. Arakawa was at the Sprouts Farmers Market between 3:30 and 4:15 p.m. Ms. Arakawa was seen on surveillance video at the CVS Pharmacy in Santa Fe from 4:12 to 4:20 p.m. She then stopped at a local pet food store at about 4:54 p.m. Her car was seen on surveillance, and the remote control clicker that is assigned to her and her vehicle was used to enter the subdivision to gain access to the gated community at 5:15 p.m. Numerous emails were unopened on her computer on February 11th. There was no additional outgoing communication from her or known activity after February 11th, 2025. The cell phone information and the cell phone data is pending. We're working with state police to get the information from those phones, but our investigation shows that all the last known communication and activity from Ms. Arakawa was on February 11th. I'm going to go ahead and turn over the podium to Dr. Jarrell. I would ask that everybody refrain from asking questions until everybody has provided their statements. I'll step up to the podium, and then we'll go ahead and field questions from the media. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Heather Jarrell, the Chief Medical Examiner for New Mexico at the Office of the Medical Investigator. I'd like to begin by stating that it is unprecedented for the Office of the Medical Investigator to make public statements about death investigations. However, the circumstances surrounding these two deaths require accurate dissemination of important information. I've also spoken with the Hackman family prior to this conference, who are aware of the autopsy findings and conclusions and are aware of this conference. On Thursday, February 27th, I performed an autopsy on Mr. Gene Hackman. Medical examiner Dr. Daniel Gallego at the Office of the Medical Investigator performed a full autopsy on Miss Betsy Arakawa Hackman, also on Thursday, February 27th. By report, Miss Arakawa Hackman's legal name is Betsy Hackman, which is how she will be referred to hereafter. The cause of death for Miss Betsy Hackman, aged 65 years, is Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. The manner of death is natural. Autopsy examination and full-body postmortem CT demonstrated no findings of trauma internally or externally, with microscopic findings consistent with hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. Laboratory testing was positive for hantavirus at a clinical lab, with required confirmation testing positive at Scientific Laboratories Division. Testing for COVID-19, influenza, and other common respiratory viruses was negative. Testing for carbon monoxide was negative. There were no other significant natural disease findings. Pills present on scene were thyroid medication, which were being taken as prescribed and is not currently a concern for a contributory cause of death. The cause of death for Mr. Gene Hackman, aged 95 years, is hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, with Alzheimer's disease as a significant contributory factor. Autopsy examination and a full-body postmortem CT examination demonstrated no acute findings of internal or external trauma and showed severe heart disease, including multiple surgical procedures involving the heart, evidence of prior heart attacks, and severe changes of the kidneys due to chronic high blood pressure. Examination of the brain showed advanced Alzheimer's disease, as well as blood vessel changes in the brain secondary to chronic high blood pressure. Laboratory testing performed at Scientific Laboratories Division was negative for COVID-19, influenza, and other common respiratory viruses. Testing for hantavirus was negative. Testing for carbon monoxide was negative. Additionally, there were no autopsy findings concerning for hantavirus infection. I have been asked when death occurred for these individuals. There is no reliable scientific method to accurately determine the exact time or date of death. Mr. Hackman's initial pacemaker data revealed cardiac activity on February 17th, with subsequent pacemaker interrogation demonstrating an abnormal rhythm of atrial fibrillation on February 18th, which was the last record of heart activity. Based on this information, it is reasonable to conclude that Mr. Hackman probably died around February 18th. Based on the circumstances, it is reasonable to conclude that Ms. Hackman passed away first, with February 11th being the last time that she was known to be alive. Lastly, clinically, hantavirus infection is characterized by flu-like symptoms consisting of fever, muscle aches, cough, sometimes vomiting and diarrhea that can progress to shortness of breath and cardiac or heart failure and lung failure. This occurs after a 1 to 8 week exposure to excrement from a primarily particular mouse species that carries hantavirus. The mortality of hantavirus, the mortality rate of the hantavirus strain in the Southwest is about 38 to 50%. The hantavirus strains in the United States are not transmissible from person to person. And so this is an appropriate time to segue to Dr. Aaron Phipps, the state public health veterinarian with the New Mexico Department of Health. But before I do so, I'd like to kindly ask for everyone to please respect the privacy that Mr. Gene Hackman, Miss Betsy Hackman, and their family and friends deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jarrell. I will now provide additional information about hantaviruses in New Mexico. There are many different types of hantaviruses found worldwide. These viruses are zoonotic, meaning they are transmitted from animals to humans. Hantaviruses are carried by rodents. The hantavirus found in New Mexico, the Sin Nombre virus, is found primarily in deer mice, but in other rodents as well. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome is a rare disease caused by hantaviruses, but a small number of human infections are found every year in New Mexico. Over the past 5 years, New Mexico has confirmed between 1 and 7 hantavirus infections in humans each year. Through the end of 2024, we have identified 136 infections over the past 50 years in New Mexico residents, 5 of these in Santa Fe County. This is a serious disease. 42% of these infections here in New Mexico were fatal. Most transmission occurs around the patient's residence or workplace, and the New Mexico Department of Health typically conducts an environmental investigation at the residence of all hantavirus cases in our jurisdiction. This can help identify specific areas that may pose higher risk, providing insight into where transmission may have occurred and how to prevent future infections. On March 5th, the New Mexico Department of Health staff conducted a risk assessment of the property, including the main residence, as well as other structures on the property. This was critically important to address concerns about health risks to first responders, as well as to inform any prevention measures needed to protect the family and other individuals entering the property in the future. We assessed the risk of exposure in the primary residence as low, similar to other well-maintained houses in New Mexico. We did identify signs of rodent entry in other structures on the property and provided information and resources about reducing the risk of hantavirus transmission related to those areas. Hantavirus can be transmitted to people through rodent urine, droppings, or saliva, so it is important to take special steps when cleaning up after rodents. Avoiding contact with or breathing in aerosolized rodent urine or feces, especially in a poorly ventilated area, is key. Detailed guidance can be found on the New Mexico Department of Health and the CDC websites, but I will provide a very brief summary now. It is important to use gloves and a well-fitting N95 mask when around or cleaning rodent-infested areas, and to open any windows or doors for at least 30 minutes beforehand to increase ventilation. Spray the area thoroughly with a 10% bleach solution or a commercial disinfectant. Let it sit for 5 minutes. Next, clean the area with paper towels, then throw them away in a covered garbage can that is regularly emptied. Before removing gloves, wash your gloved hands with soap and water or with a disinfectant, and then after removing gloves, wash your hands again with soap and water. It's important to never sweep up or vacuum mouse droppings, since this can spread particles up into the air. Since hantavirus is found throughout New Mexico, awareness of these risks and how to reduce them is important for all New Mexicans. The New Mexico Department of Health extends our deepest condolences to the families and friends during this difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that'll conclude the statements for today. We will go ahead and take questions. I ask that there be one question per agency, and please state who you're directing the question to, as there's several individuals here at this conference. Sir.
Sheriff, just to clarify the timeline here, does this mean Gene Hackman was likely home with his deceased wife for a week before he passed away himself?
Yes, I would assume that is the case.
Do you believe, given his Alzheimer's status, that Mr. Hackman was able to live on his own and survive for those 7 days?
I think that's more a question, maybe for Dr. Jarrell.
Just to repeat so that everyone could hear, the question was, do we believe that Mr. Hackman was able to live on his own and survive? The answer to that question is that Mr. Hackman showed evidence of advanced Alzheimer's disease. I'm not aware of what his normal daily functioning capability was. He was in a very poor state of health. He had significant heart disease, and I think ultimately that is what resulted in his death. I was able to look at fluid to determine if he was dehydrated, and I did not see evidence of dehydration. I did see evidence of very poor kidney function, and I think he died as a result of his heart disease and with Alzheimer's being that contributing factor.
What about starvation?
The question was, what about starvation? So there was no food in his stomach, which means he had not eaten recently, but he had also no evidence of dehydration.
So based on your understanding of the progression of the Alzheimer's, do you believe that he was possibly not aware that his wife had died or didn't know what to do in that situation?
It's difficult to answer. The question was he aware that Miss Hackman had died? And I think that question's difficult to answer, but I can tell you that he was in an advanced state of Alzheimer's, and it's quite possible that he was not aware that she was deceased.
This is for the sheriff. Considering the circumstances under which Mr. Hackman was found in the mudroom with his walking cane and sunglasses by him, do you think there is a possibility that he was trying to get help for his wife?
That's hard to answer. Again, it's hard to get into the frame of mind of what was happening at the time. And I don't know if we'll ever have the answer to that question, whether he was going to go for help or he wasn't. Sir?
Sheriff, are there any other big questions that you're trying to answer? I mean, does this answer the biggest questions you've had about their death in this case? Is there anything else that you're really seeking?
Yeah, so the question is there any other big questions that are left? I think a lot of questions were answered here today. I think there was, Dr. Jarrell went over the cause of death, and I think a lot of those questions are answered. I think the timeline that we've been given as far as the pacemaker results and the history and evidence that we found as far as the timeline of Miss Arakawa, I think a lot of the questions have been answered. We are waiting on the cell phones, but I would very unlikely that the cell phones are going to show anything else. Another question?
Sheriff, are there any signs of, what have you learned about Mr. Hackman's communication after February 11th? Did you talk to any friends of his who had spoken with him during that week-long period, or know anything about what he was doing?
So the question is whether there was any communication from Mr. Hackman or activity, and no, at this point, no. I don't know if he used cell phones or technology or emails. There's no indication of that. So right now there is no activity from Mr. Hackman.
Sheriff, do you know if his pacemaker was connected to some sort of monitoring service? Was anyone tipped off that something was wrong?
The question was his pacemaker connected to a monitoring service? The answer to that is that his physician, one of his physicians, had contacted me and told me that they could see the data from the 17th, but that to really get the most information from that would come from the interrogation of the pacemaker. And that's as much as I can answer, not being a cardiologist.
But they didn't say whether or not they were monitoring, or was his pacemaker equipped to send back data in exact time so that someone could say, hey, something's not right.
I can't answer that question, I'm sorry.
Sheriff. Dr.
Sheriff,
Sir.
Fox, was there any footage that came from the body cam from the house?
I'm sorry, what was?
Was there any footage or anything that you can see from, like, body cam footage from the house? Any?
Are you talking about the body cams that the investigator, the responding personnel were wearing?
Video. Is there any video?
No. So there was no outside surveillance or interior surveillance that we are aware of in the residence. So there was nothing to show the activity inside or outside the residence, and not at this time, no.
So Dr. Jarrell, you mentioned that one of the symptoms of Hantavirus is shortness of breath. We learned before that Betsy Hackman was laying on the floor when she was found. What kind of medical episode would she have had to cause her to fall and not be able to ask for help?
The question was regarding shortness of breath with hantavirus and what kind of medical episode would we expect from somebody found on the floor. And I think to be able to answer that question fairly, it can go back to hantavirus infection, which initiates with what's called a prodromal phase. That's initially flu-like symptoms where a person has fever and muscle aches, that they don't feel well. After, of course, being exposed to rodent excrement. And that phase can last roughly 3 to 6 days. And then they can transition to that pulmonary phase where they have fluid in their lungs and around their lungs. And at that point, a person can die very quickly, within 24 to 48 hours, roughly speaking, without medical treatment. It's not uncommon to find someone down on the floor as part of a terminal collapse, so to speak, and that may very well have been what happened to Ms. Hackman.
You're estimating her time of death on the 11th, or is it possible that she collapsed and was alive for a couple of days?
It's hard to say. I don't think she was on the floor alive for a couple of days. I think that she went through that time period, and I don't know when she began to feel ill. And those are just things that I don't know that I'm ever going to have the answers to. But I think, and going back to that initial time period, roughly 3 to 6 days of feeling ill and then succumbing pretty quickly after fluid begins to build up in the lungs.
Given the dog was crated, is it fair to assume that the dog died from dehydration or starvation?
I don't think we know the answer to that. However, given the timelines presented, it is a possibility.
Is it possible the dog had the hantavirus?
Dogs do not get sick from hantavirus.
Sir.
You mentioned that Betsy Hackman went to a pharmacy. Do you know if she consulted with a pharmacist or what medications she might have sought out?
The question was if we knew on Betsy's visit to the pharmacy if there was some medication or if she consulted with a pharmacist. We don't have that information, and I'm not sure that we can get that information due to HIPAA laws, but we don't have that information right now. Sir. At this point, there's no indication that there was a caretaker at the home.
Sheriff, with the footage that you saw of Betsy on February 11th, was there any indication that she was feeling shortness of breath or having trouble moving around while she was running these errands?
You know, we can analyze the video a little more, but it's going to be hard to tell. She was walking around, she was shopping, she was visiting stores, but my detectives didn't indicate that there was any problem with her or struggle of her getting around. So, and I believe she had a mask on also, so I'll have to confirm that, but yeah, that there wasn't any indication of that. Sasha?
Sheriff, this might be for you or Chief Moya, I don't know who could better answer it, but when was the last time you guys dealt with a hantavirus case in Santa Fe County, or responded to one?
Yeah, the question was last time the city of Santa Fe or the county dealt with a hantavirus case. I think we're gonna have to look into that. I'll get back to you. I would have to do some data before we pull that
Have you had any
information.
communication with the CDC? Is there a concern about a bigger public health issue here when it comes to hantavirus?
The CDC is aware of this case. Hantavirus is a notifiable condition nationally. All hantavirus cases are notified to them. This is not an unusual case. We get cases every year, unfortunately. So we're not seeing any indications of any abnormal or unusual patterns.
Dr. Jarrell?
We'll go ahead and take 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. Is there anybody that hasn't asked a question yet? Sir.
Do we know, did Betsy communicate to anyone, family, friends, that she was feeling ill? Did she make anyone aware?
Again, we're going through some of the communications, and I think the cell phones may have some indications of that prior to the 11th. But as of this moment, I don't have any information that she was indicating that she was feeling ill during any communication. One more question?
Since there's no sense that this is criminal in nature, nature? Are you closing this investigation? Are you still going to be releasing body camera footage from the deputies that entered the house? What happens next?
So we will deal with IPRA requests as necessary. If there's body camera or any request for public information, we will be releasing that because of the law. But yeah, we consider this an open investigation until we close the loopholes of the cell phones, until we finish out the necropsy results of the canine and other loose ends that we need to tie up. But I think we're pretty close to the timeline and with the information that Dr. Jarrell provided.
One question on the heart disease: is it fair to describe this as a heart attack, or is it not? Is that not an accurate term for the heart disease that he suffered?
The question was, is it fair to conclude that Mr. Hackman died from a heart attack? And the answer to that is that it's a little bit difficult to say. I saw no microscopic evidence of a recent heart attack. However, those changes can also take some time to develop, several hours to develop, so that I can see it under the microscope. He could have had an abnormal heart rhythm. We already know that he was in atrial fibrillation on the 18th, and that could have evolved into a more terminal heart rhythm.
Is heart failure an okay way to describe it? We use that terminology.
The question was, did Mr. Hackman have heart failure? Oftentimes we see fluid around the lungs and heart failure and congestion of the liver. I did not see that in his case, but he had very poor heart, or very extensive heart disease. And so he would have been predisposed to abnormal heart rhythms, and hence he had a pacemaker as well.
Thank you, everybody. That'll conclude the press conference for today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.